So the new terminology that we're going to talk about in this lecture is strategy. But before we can talk about that, we need to talk about a move first. So a move is basically just an action. So it can be, let's say like a play of one card. It can be like when you use a skill once when you press one button. So a move is basically just when you do an action once. Now a strategy is kind of like a bot in a way. So it's like a way that you can play the game from beginning to end. So a strategy. It's kind of like a way that you can play a game. Or I'm just gonna say an algorithm that can play a game. From beginning to end. And it will be able to handle all situations and can handle all situations. Now the keyword here is that it can handle all situations, and then it can do that from the beginning to end. So basically, well, it's like a complete bot that can play the game from, it can basically play the game for you. Now, there is also another terminology called the pure strategy. So we're gonna talk about two kinds of strategy. So one is a pure strategy. For now, the terminology for pure strategy doesn't seem all that different from the strategy itself. But for now, let me just say that a pure strategy gives you an exact way to play the game. Now, there is another one, we're going to talk about this later, is the mixed strategy. So, this is going to come later. But a mixed strategy is a way to play the game that uses the probability as well. Now, let's talk about this in the next example here. Let's say this is actually the game that we talked about in the last lecture. So let me actually just read out that here. Alice can choose between head or tail, and then Bob is gonna play next and he's gonna choose between head or tail. And then we can talk about the outcome, but let me leave that for now. Let me focus on the strategy here. So, if I were Alice, it's kind of easy to see that Alice has two possible ways to play the game. So I can say that Alice has two pure strategies. And strategies. So I'm just gonna call it S1 and S2. So one way for Alice to play is to play head. Let me actually just write H for now. And another way is to play tail. So yeah, it's pretty simple. We can see that Alice has two ways to play head or play tail. How about Bob? Bob has two ways to play the game. So, he has that many pure strategy. Now, at first glance, it seems like, well, Bob should probably also have two pure strategies. I'm just gonna call this T1 and T2. Yeah, so one way for Bob to play is to just play head, and another way is to just play tail. But we can kind of see that Bob has, he can choose between head or tail, but there's more way to play than this. We see earlier that if we were Bob, then we need to observe how Alice play first. So if Alice play head, then Bob should play tail. If Alice play tail, then Bob should play head. So Bob's choice should kind of somehow depends on Alice's choice, and there need to be a way to represent that. So instead of just writing simple head or tail, let me actually do this. So it actually is going to be that Bob is going to have 4 ways to play the game, and that depends on how Alice plays first. So let me actually first kind of rewrite Alice's two strategies here. So when Alice first come into play, she has 2 options to choose from head or tail, and she do that out of nothing. So I'm just gonna write this as from nothing she choose head, and then from nothing she choose tail. So this is a list of 2 pure strategies. Now for Bob, well, he can first observe how Alice play, and he can say that, oh, if Alice play head, then I'm also gonna play head. If Alice play tail, then I'm also going to play tail. So the first thing, let me kind of write it this way. So let me actually do this. So for Bob, let me use color orange. So this head would correspond to Alice move, and then this tail would correspond to Alice tail. So the first strategy for Bob is to, wait a minute, so let's see, if Alice play head, I'm gonna play head. If Alice play tail, then I'm also gonna play head. So the first strategy for Bob here is to always play head. So this is kind of one thing that Bob can do, always play head. Now another way that Bob can play is to say that, oh, if Alice play head, then I'm gonna play head. But if Alice play tail, then I'm gonna play tail. So this is going to be to play the same as Alice. So the head that you see here corresponds to Alice head earlier, and then the tail that you see here, it corresponds to the tail that is the Alice play. And then what you see afterwards, this is Bob's move. So this is another way that Bob can write his own mod, so just play the same as Alice. Another way that he can do this is to say that, oh, if Alice play tail, then I'm gonna play tail. And then, wait a minute, no. If Alice play head, I'm gonna play tail. And then if Alice play tail, then I'm gonna play head. So this is to play different from Alice. This is still the opposite of Alice. So if Alice play head, I'm gonna play tail. If Alice play tail, I'm gonna play head. And the last way that Bob can do is to just play tail. The last way that Bob can do is to just always play tail. So these are 4 ways that Bob can play. So notice how, because Bob plays after Alice, so he has a little more option. He can just choose to play head in all situations, to play the same as Alice in all situations, to play opposite, to play different from Alice in all situations, or to always play tail. Now let's talk about the next example here. So again, this is kind of the same as the last situation. So let me just copy and paste this. Except that now we have this information structure. Bob doesn't know where he is at. Now for Alice, the strategy is the same. So Alice is still gonna have 2 pure strategies. However, for Bob, because notice how, well, earlier Bob will have 4 pure strategies. That is 4 things that he can do. But for now, well, you can kind of see from here, because Bob will not be able to see Alice move anymore. So he cannot play T2 and T3 anymore. So he can choose only between head or tail. And that's exactly what happens here. So Bob will now only have 2 pure strategies. So it's going to be T1 and T2. So T1 is going to be, well, no, because this is information set, he can no longer see what Alice does. So he doesn't know if Alice play head or tail. So notice how this is different from last time as well, because last time Bob can see what Alice does exactly, but for now Bob is not going to be able to tell. So he can say that, well, whether or not Alice play head or tail, I'm just gonna always play head. And T2 is gonna be that whether or not Alice play head or tail, I'm just always gonna play tail. So here again, head and tail, this corresponds to Alice's action that we see earlier. And then the orange thing here, this corresponds to the option that Bob is going to do later. Now let's talk about this part C here. So Alice once again is the first player, and Alice is going to choose between fall, high, or low. So Alice has 3 options now. She can choose between fold, play high, or play low. Now, if Alice fold, then Bob is going to play next, and he can choose between fold or call. However, if Alice play high or low, so in this latter 2 option, Bob will not know. Bob, Alice choose. So there is going to be an information structure, but this information structure will only cover the latter 2 cases. So I'm just gonna draw a circle around the latter 2 choice here. So Bob will be able to tell if Alice fold or if Alice high or play high or play low, but Bob will not be able to tell whether Alice play high or play low in the latter 2 cases here. So Bob can only tell if Alice give up or Alice decide to play, but Bob will not be able to tell whether she plays high or plays low. Now, if Alice play high or low, Bob will not be able to tell, and then he has to decide between fold, high, or low. So now Bob has to decide between the 3 options here, and that's the same in both case, which is going to be to fold, play high, or play low. Fold, play high, or play low. So these are all the possible outcomes, but I leave out the payoff for now because let's focus on the strategies. So for Alice, it seems pretty simple. Alice will have 3 pure strategies. And that is, she can choose to play between to fold, to play high, or to play low. Now let's talk about Bob then. Bob will have something, pure strategies. So how many pure strategies are Bob going to have? Well, let's see. For sure, he can see that if Alice fold, then he can decide to fold or he can decide to call. But if Alice play high or play low, Bob is not gonna know, and he can still decide between the 3 options. So if I were to draw this out, notice how the first way to play is that if Alice fold, then he is going to fold as well. So in this scenario, then if Alice decides to play high or play low, Bob will have 3 possible ways. So if he decides to fold here, so this fold corresponds to this fold. If he decides to play this pad, then he still has 3 other options if Alice play high or play low. So there should be 3 possible strategies that correspond to this alone. So if Bob decides to fold, if Alice fold, then if Alice play high or play low, so if Alice play high or play low, Bob should still be able to choose whether to fold, to play high, or to play low. To fold, to play high, or to play low. And this will all correspond to the fact that he chooses to fold when Alice fold. Well, but this is only one way to play the game when he sees that Alice fold. If Alice were to fold, then he can still call. So this is another possibilities here. He can see that, if Alice fold, then I'm going to call. And the same thing is gonna happen here. If he decides to call, if he decides to play this pad, then he can decide to fold or play high or play low when Alice chooses to play high or play low. So if Alice chooses high or low, he can still choose to fold, he can still choose to play high, or he can still choose to play low. So these are all the possible outcomes if Bob chooses to call when Alice fold. Now let's go back and talk a little bit about the theory behind what we do here. So one thing is that the number of pure strategies that player has is going to be just the product of the number of moves from each information set. And we can see this in the example below here. Because for the first part, we see that Bob has 2 information sets. Let me use purple here. So here Bob has 2 options, and here Bob has 2 options. If I multiply them, 2 times 2 is 4, and that's the number of pure strategies that Bob has. For part B though, notice how this 2 thing is in the same information set. So even though I see 2, I'm just gonna count them as one thing. So in each of the nodes here, Bob has 2 options. So the number of pure strategies that Bob has is gonna be just 2. Now for the last part, Bob has 6 pure strategies. And this is actually because, if you notice that, Bob has 2 information sets. So this one is a loner, so this one is a singleton. So Bob has 2 ways to play if a list were to fall. However, if a list were to play high or play low, Bob will not be able to tell. And then Bob will have 3 ways to play here. So 2 times 3 is going to be 6. And that's going to be the number of pure strategies that we see here. Now, the last terminology that we have is a strategy profile. So a strategy profile is basically a collection of pure strategy 1 from each player. You can think of it as, like, let's say if we have 2 players, Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob send 1 strategy to play against each other. So let's say Alice send 1 bot and Bob send 1 bot to play against Alice. So Alice and Bob, they send a bot to play against each other. So when Alice and Bob does that, that will lead to an outcome. Yeah, so whenever there is a strategy profile, that means it gives a way to play the game from beginning to end, and it's gonna lead to some possible outcome. For example, let's say if I look at this example here, and Alice chooses to play S1, and Bob, let's say, chooses to play T2. So what that means is, Alice has sent, like, let's say, this bot to play for her, and Bob has chosen this bot to play for him. So that means Alice is gonna play head, so she goes out this part, and then Bob will play the same as Alice. If Alice play head, he's gonna play head. If Alice play tail, he's gonna play tail. So this bot see that Alice play head, so he's gonna also play head. So that is one way to play the game. So a strategy profile is a bot versus bot. It leads to an outcome. So it's one way to play the game from beginning to end. So for this one, let's say Alice choose, so let's now say Alice choose S2 and Bob choose T1. So this means Alice is gonna choose tail, and then Bob is gonna choose head. So this is gonna be where the games end. And for the last one, let's say Alice choose S3, and then Bob, let's say Bob also choose T3. So that means what Alice does is that she's going to play high. So this is how Alice play. And Bob say that, well, if Alice fall, then let's fall. But if Alice play high or play low, then let's play low. So this is gonna be what Bob does. And so that's one way to play the game from beginning to end.